And of course, we had to come up with, the best way to end this year because it was such a challenging year for most of us. Let's use that word. I'm trying to rewire my own neuroscience here and use positive words to describe this year. So I'd like to first off introduce, we have Hayden Lee, who is an MCC. Now, Hayden is extremely well known in the coaching industry, very, very popular in his, I guess, is it your hometown of Los Angeles? You're native to LA. I think he was rated as one of the top 20 coaches in the area. He's worked with executives from Fortune 500 companies. He's also trained people like me. Okay, Hayden was my trainer and I owe him a lot, and I'm so happy he's here. We also have Doctors Kelly Kent, and we have Dr. Anne-Marie Seco joining us today. They are both neuroscientists, and today's discussion will all be around resilience through the lens of neuroscience and coaching. So I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to hand this over to Hayden and Dr. Kelly and Dr. Anne-Marie.
Cool. Wow, thank you so much, Islam. What a great introduction. Yeah, but really, I am just someone who loves coaching and loves helping people and loves serving, making the world a better place. And that's what coaching is about, and that's what neuroscience is about. So I love being able to, combine these two disciplines. But welcome, we're happy to be here. ICF Saudi Arabia, we're so excited, and we know it's in the evening for you. We are all in Los Angeles, so we are just getting our morning started while you are all wrapping up your days with us. So we feel very honored and grateful for this opportunity. And yeah, I just want to make sure, if you're able to engage and participate, we would love that, right? Coaching is not a spectator sport. It's definitely something, the more you participate, the more you get out of it. So if you're able to type questions in the chat or interact in the chat, please do so. And Dr. Anne-Marie will definitely be able to answer questions you have. But if you're able to, if you're in a position to turn your cameras on and be in a position to type in the chat, please do so. But yeah, for me, I am an MCC. I've been coaching for 10 years. And, I'm a trainer at Coach Training EDU, which is where I had the privilege to train and mentor Islam on her coaching. And I'm so proud of all the growth that you've had, Islam, and how you're bringing coaching to Saudi Arabia is awesome. But yeah, I'm excited to be, the purpose of today is to really learn how to incorporate neuroscience into coaching, right? Because I think oftentimes coaches, they're fascinated by the material, but they don't know how to incorporate it or apply it into a coaching session. And that's what we're going to be doing here today. So we're going to get a chance to practice today. Dr. Kelly is going to be giving us some cool neuroscience, facts, and then I'll come in to teach you all how to actually seamlessly and easily apply that into a coaching session, ask powerful questions about it, and really help your clients have a deeper level of growth and transformation from learning what's happening in their brain during the coaching journey, like what's literally happening in your brain when powerful questions are happening, or when limiting beliefs are happening, or when we have negative thoughts. When clients understand what's happening in the brain, they're much more able to manage it better and be more productive. So with that said, let me introduce my neuroscience partner, Dr. Kelly. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Kelly Kent, and I'm really, really honored to be here with you all today. Thank you for doing this evening journey, taking this evening journey with us. So I just wanted to tell a little bit of the story of how Hayden and Anne-Marie and I came together. So the second neuroscientist and the third of the MMI trio, the Mastermind Institute trio, is Dr. Anne-Marie Seco, who's there on camera right now and may go off camera at a couple moments because she's on double duty right now with her infant who's in the background, but she'll also be able to answer. I know Hayden said this earlier, I'll just reiterate, she'll answer questions. So please feel free to populate questions in the chat, because Hayden and I will be a little bit of the performance, and then she'll be able to respond to that if you have neuroscience questions and maybe some coaching questions too. But Hayden is by far the coaching expert, which segues me back into the story I wanted to tell, which is simply that Dr. Seco and I have been trying to apply neuroscience to real lives for years. We were in education first, and then we were in organizational development after that. And it's all been fine, and we were consulting, but there was a missing piece about, we both have a sense of the power of understanding your brain and how it really can change the world for the better, change individuals, etc. And we were just missing that translation into that final language of how to do it in your everyday life and how to use it to meet goals. And we knew that we wanted to pair up with coaches, and we were fiddling here and there and networking and just not meeting the right partner until we came across Hayden at a very unrelated to coaching event. But that level of expertise from his master's certification level and practice and experience really came through right away. And in that way, we were able to correspond, we're talking hardcore science, even though we're going to make it very accessible and relatable to everyday life with, real professional coaching and expertise. And we were able to marry the two, and it's been really beautiful. And so I just wanted to share part of that story with you. And with that, I'll launch, unless there's anything else, Hayden.
I
Okay.
wanted to add too, if anyone has questions in the chat and you're more comfortable typing the question in Arabic, our wonderful, ICF Saudi Chapter Farah says, she can translate it into English and then we can answer in English. So yeah, if there's any, language barriers, don't let that, stop you from asking your question and participating. We will definitely help with that.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, so let's get going, because we do have not only some very, rich neuroscience to share, but we also want to be sure we all have time to practice today. So we feel very strongly about being able to, and it is exactly that piece that we're so excited to have Hayden for, because it's the actual implementation and the actual practice that is going to be walking the talk of neuroscience, which is that, of course, practice is how you get to mastery, right? And we'll talk about that right now. So today, overall, we'll be talking about what's going on in your brain when we're experiencing resilience and how we can build that skill set, which it is one. But to get there, we have to start with the most foundational principle in neuroscience, which is that of our capacity for growth, right? So we start very basic here with our brain, which you're all familiar with, obviously an animation of or a drawing of the brain, but it's, this 3-pound kind of homogeneous looking organ. But really, if you zoom in, you will see that it is filled with 100 billion of these. Okay, again, of course, we're looking at a drawing to make it engaging, but what I really want to draw your attention to is that these, which is the primary cell type in the brain called the neuron, they're very strange looking. Okay, so we colorize them and we draw them and we make them, cartoony, because we really want to accentuate how bizarre looking they are, right? So this is something I want us all to spend a full 30 seconds kind of taking in, drinking in that weirdness. Why does it look so strange? The branching, roots-like, snowflakes, any number of things that come to mind when you look at this shape, but it doesn't necessarily strike me as what I think of most typically as a cell, right? When I ask people what do they think of when they think of the shape of a cell, they often will say something round or spherical, or maybe it's squarey or flatty. Like if you remember, I don't know if you all looked at onion cells in biology class, but some sort of cell that would be more familiar would not look like this, right? But there's a purpose there. Of course, it's got to do with its functionality. What is its primary role? And again, I'll remind you that earlier I said there are 100 billion of them. In all of our brains, everyone in this Zoom room right now has somewhere on the order of 100 billion of these in our brain, which is not really a number that we can comprehend, but nonetheless, there it is. And each one of them has this shape, essentially, because these neurons are defined by their role, their purpose, which is to make connections with neighboring neurons, okay? And that's depicted here. We have two neurons. They're connected to each other via this, it's actually a space, you may know this, it's a gap in between neurons that's called a synapse. But that's really where the magic happens. And so these neurons have this wild, bizarre, beautiful shape because they are defined by their ability to make new connections with each other. And they do that at this space called the synapse. And so when you think of or try to comprehend 100 billion, I also want you to think of each one of those making up to 10,000 of these connections via these synapses. So that is just wild, incredible. And that it means that we have vast potential for crosstalk. And I'll kind of refer to it that from here on out, crosstalk and communication in the brain. So again, 100 billion of these, each one can make up to 10,000 connections. And then the question is, what's our role there, right? And that's where this slide comes in, which is that I want to just direct your attention to what the difference is between the slides on the left, the neurons on the left and the neurons on the right. And if you'll notice that there are many more synapses and connections. And in fact, those purple parts, they were labeled on a previous slide, but those are called the dendrites, if you're not familiar. And so the dendrites of one cell, one neuron, are connecting to the other neuron via these synapses and having this crosstalk. But the question is, what's our role in getting from the neurons on the left to the neurons on the right? What does it reflect? Why am I showing you that there are these differences between the two pairs of neurons? And what do we have to do with it? And why we're here today is because the brain has this incredible, indefatigable, one of my favorite words, potential for plasticity, potential for growth, for change, and for learning. But the question is, how do we get there? Because this process of getting from the neurons on the left to the neurons on the right on the order of 100 billion, each of which up to 10,000 times, is not passive. It's very, very active. It requires effort. It requires repetition, practice, and in particular, deliberate practice, okay? So not mindless practice, but effortful, passionate, uncomfortable, and intentional practice. Okay, and so all of this is the foundation, because now we're about to launch into what's happening in the brain when we're practicing resilience, because there's no exception to which we can master new skills in the brain. All skills, even the ones that we think of as less tangible. Okay, and so this slide is showing us a variety of skills. We have a juggler. Okay, you can imagine that's a motor skill. That's a physical skill like riding a bike. She's practiced, she gets better. She shows changes in her brain as a result of motor skill practice. That makes sense, right? Then we have the gentleman on the right who's playing the saxophone, and that also makes sense. And in fact, there's a lot of popular neuroscience out there about musicians and the changes they show in their brains. And that can also make a lot of sense because it's tangible, you can touch it, right? You think about the work you have to do to get better at it. And of course it would show changes in your brain. But then I want you to reflect on the picture in the middle. What's happening with this young woman? Well, she may be joyful, she may be reflective, she may be upset, she may be experiencing any number of things, but they're less tangible, right? They're more about a feeling, they're more about an idea in her head. They're not necessarily what we think traditionally of as skill sets like riding a bike. Nonetheless, she is probably practicing some form of what we're going to get into today, in that we're talking about mindsets, we're talking about emotions, we're talking about reflection, we're talking about things that we don't traditionally think of as skill sets that we can practice and get better at, but that nonetheless are controlled by the brain. And the brain is defined by its capacity for growth. The brain is made up of neurons. Every single one of us, without exception, has this capacity for growth and mastery because we have neurons that are defined by their ability to make new connections, and they govern our thoughts as well as our motor function. So I just want us to all be on the same page that the brain has this indefatigable capacity for growth, and that our capacity for mastering new skill sets applies to all things, including those that we might think of as more spiritual or more, less touchable, less motor skill oriented, but that are more about our thoughts. Okay. All right. So with all of that as our foundation, let's move into specifics around resilience. And we're going to talk about our emotional system. We're going to do it a little bit in two parts, kind of to break it up so that Hayden and I can go back and forth and you don't have to hear me drone on and on and on the whole time. But also kind of to break up the neuroscience a little bit. Okay, so first part is we're part lizard and part human, which some of you may have heard the idea of the lizard brain or the reptilian brain before. And so let's just talk about that. We have this girl here, and she's in a house. You'll notice that brick house behind her, and she's sharing this house with many other species, okay? And the idea here is that we're going to be using this as a metaphor for our emotional brain, right? So there is lots of popular neuroscience out there that is kind of full of myth and really not that scientifically sound. I'll just give you one example that we use 10% of our brain. That's a complete myth, okay? But there are some popular neuroscience concepts that are not totally myth. And one of them is that indeed, we do have what we call a reptilian or a lizard brain. And that's because we use this metaphor of a house to describe the idea of the wheel is not reinvented every time a new species evolves on the planet. And so we have inherited some very evolutionarily ancient subregions of the brain from some of these species. So all of these species shown here most of these species shown here have the region of the brain that the lizard has. And when you think about what a lizard is thinking about, it's really, or what's on a lizard's mind, it's really quite confined, right? I mean, lizards are thinking about surviving. They're thinking about eating. They're thinking they might have to fight. They might have to flee. But it's really very simple. And there is learning there. But they have the part of the brain that is really, its primary role is to help us survive, to escape predation, to find food, to stay safe, right? So it's a fight or flight area of the brain, right? And we inherited it. And just to come back to the house for one more moment to sort of describe the idea is that we think of it a little bit like a starter house, like our reptilian brain is a tiny bit like our first home, right? So we're newly an adult, or we've decided to settle down somewhere and we decide to get a home. But then what if our family expands? What if we find partnership and maybe there are children and we want to expand and we need more space? We don't usually knock down a starter home and start all over. We build on. And the same idea with the brain, because what's so cool about us is that we are humans. We're not lizards. We did inherit the region of the brain that helps us survive from lizards, but we have all these other additional areas. And that's why we have so much power for resilience and bouncing back and for plasticity. And we're gonna be ending on that note, but we'll have to start with this foundational piece, which is that we've inherited this region from lizards, which is our fight or flight area. So what does it look like in humans? It's teeny tiny. There it is right there. This is oversimplified. So of course, everything we share with you is making it palatable, accessible. And so that means it's a little simplified. So just, bear with me if you know some of this science at a more advanced level, but there we have a region called the amygdala, which is very well known for its role in our fear response, okay? But I want you to take note of its size and shape. It's tiny. It looks like an almond, and that's actually the root of the word amygdala. And also notice what's around that, a big, huge human brain. And so again, we're going to come back to the resilience piece and the optimism part, which is all about us being humans and not lizards. But there is our amygdala. It's responsible for our fear response. And then let's think about what that might look like for a moment. So, early evolving humans, might have needed to escape a predator, right? Might have needed to escape a lion. And in fact, maybe we're at the watering hole one day and we see the lion at the watering hole and we, have a couple choices, right? So let's think about the versions of our ancestors that could have existed. There could have been a version of our ancestor that thought, lion, no big whoop, I'm fine, right? What happens to that version of our ancestor? That guy probably gets eaten, doesn't pass on his genetic material, right? So we are necessarily not descended from the versions of our ancestors that were unconcerned, right? That were unworried. We are descended from the versions of our ancestors that were scared, really wanted to hightail it out of there. So think about the emotions going into this. They're freaking out, they're worried, they're aroused, right? So they're having a fight or flight response system. It's very important. It's helping them evolve, right? I mean, it's part of our evolutionary story. And at the same time, I want you to think about what else is happening for this early ancestor of ours. They're also taking note of where the sun is in the sky. What time of day is it? Why? Because I don't want to come back again tomorrow at the same time and have the same potential risk of meeting a predator, right? So not only do I have to be super aroused because, and I'm going to be using some words interchangeably here. So let me just clarify that for a moment. Arousal, in this sense, what we're talking about is emotional heightened activity, right? So I'm caring a lot about this because it's important for my survival. That's what I mean when I say arousal and when I say emotions and when I say stress response. For today, these are kind of interchangeable words in the biology sense, okay? So I have to be very, very aroused, like, oh my goodness, I've got to get out of here. But I also have to be acutely attentive to my environment so that I can learn. Okay, and I want us to think very deeply about that. This means that emotions and learning have always been very tied. They are necessarily always integrated. The idea that intellect and emotions are separate is wildly unscientific. It is always the case that when we are doing our best learning, it is necessarily because we are emotionally engaged, because the brain interprets things that emotionally arouse us as important for our survival. Okay, so that's the version of our ancestor that we descended from, because they were more likely to go on to pass on their genetic material. Okay, so a couple important points here. One, fight or flight is good. It serves a really important purpose. We did inherit that lizard brain. Two, emotions and learning are tied. And this slide is sort of to just drive home that message. I want you to feel icky when you look at it. Of course, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5. Does it make you itch? Does it make you want to change the screen? Are you mad at me? Right? And then I want you to think, well, why are you feeling emotions about a silly math problem, right? It's just a math problem that's incorrect, but no big deal. But yet, because it's so ingrained, it's ancient for us. Our whole lives, we've understood this formula, 2 + 2 = 4, not 5, right? And so it should feel uncomfortable. And just to kind of really send home that message that intellect and emotions are really tied, especially when they're deeply ingrained in that way, okay? So moving on to another point, and I'll make the image go away right now, but I just wanted to show you briefly because it's actually a study that's done in the lab, where if we flash an image like that to a person who is in an fMRI, okay? So F is for functional. You're probably familiar with an MRI where you take a scan of the body, but in neuroscience, we very often use this machine to look at activity patterns in the brain. And we do that with the fMRI. And again, the F is just functional. So the person is awake, they're performing some cognitive task, right? They're looking at a picture in this case, which I already showed you, or they're thinking of their mother, or sometimes they're pressing a button. They can't move their head very much, but they're using their brain. And we're looking at activity patterns in the brain according to whatever the task is. And in this case, we've flashed this picture. Okay, now remember, that was a guy with a gun, but we have flashed it in less than 250 milliseconds. And the reason that time is important is because that is a threshold at which if you flash the picture for less than that time, the person actually does not consciously register having seen the picture. Okay. And you might be familiar with the idea of like subliminal messages and stuff like that. There is a time threshold under which if we see an image, we don't register seeing it. Okay. But the neuroscientist who's watching the participant in the fMRI knows that the participant saw the image because we see a response in the brain in our occipital lobe, which is at the back here. It processes our vision. Okay. So again, I flash a picture of a guy with a gun, less than 250 milliseconds. I'm the researcher. The participant in the fMRI, I see evidence that they see the image. But if I say, did you see the picture of the man with a gun? You're going to say no. Okay. So it's not long enough for the intellectual human part of the brain to this part up at the front that makes us very human to understand that we've seen it, but our regions at the back have registered it as visual stimuli. Okay. But I will also see something else because that image is stressful, right? Somebody's holding a gun to you. The image is stressful and the brain understands stress very well because those are the evolutionarily ancient regions, right? So I will also see a fight or flight response. I will see amygdala activity. I'll see that you saw the image, even though you don't know it, and I'll see amygdala activity. And I'll ask you, how do you feel? And you'll say, fine, but I'll have galvanic skin responder things on your body so that I can detect sweat. I will see you have an elevated heart response, heart rate. I will see changes in your eyes, all sorts of physiological responses that let me know not only did you see the image, even though you don't know you did, but you're having a stress response as a result. Okay, so this is a big deal because this fight or flight response can be entirely unconscious. Okay, so we got a couple points. One, emotions and learning are tied, always have been, necessarily should be, and fight or flight, our arousal, our emotions can be entirely unconscious. Okay, and then yet another really important point, which is that we have a negative bias, and I'll explain why we're looking at this beautiful bird to demonstrate this point. So the idea is, again, think back to our early evolution where we're on a savanna or something and we're roaming and we hear a rustle in the bushes. Okay, you know, again, think of the example I used earlier, right? So if we're hearing a rustle in the bushes and we're a version of our early ancestors that says, it's just a beautiful heron, it's no big deal, that all the time we assume that it's something non-threatening, some of the time we're going to be wrong. Some of the time that rustle in the bushes is going to be a threat. It's going to be a predator. It's going to end our life and we will not pass on our genetic material. Right? As opposed to if we're the version of our ancestors that assumes every rustle in the bush is a threat or a predator or can end our lives, then some of the time we're wrong, but we escape predation, we pass on our genetic material. So we are necessarily descended from the version of our ancestors that assumed all surprises were threats. Okay. And so we do have a negative bias where we interpret things negatively, even when we're incorrect. Okay. We have a default tendency to interpret changes in the status quo as threatening because of this evolutionary purpose that it served. Okay. So what we're doing is we're painting a picture of our fight or flight system where we appreciate it because it got us here. And we recognize that we have some kinks and then we have to override them. Okay. So we have these points here. Let's just summarize those three that we talked about. Emotions and learning are tied. Fight or flight response system can be very unconscious, entirely unconscious, and we do have a negative bias. Okay, so all of that can feel quite overwhelming, but I told you we would tell an optimistic story today, and so here we are. That little tiny amygdala, look at its size, it's weeny teeny compared to this big, beautiful human brain here on the left, and in particular, the part of the brain that I've highlighted in teal, which is our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that makes us most uniquely human. It's evolutionarily much more recent, and it's enormous. and it's got incredible potential for plasticity. And this is where our potential for resilience comes in, and our intentionality around building skill sets for bouncing back and overriding the negative bias, the fight or flight response system that can sometimes paralyze us. This is where this power lies. And before we do a little bit more neuroscience, I said we were going to go a little back and forth. We're going to do that right now. I'm going to exchange it back to turn it back over to Hayden, and then I'll come back for some more.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kelly. That was awesome. Before we do the poll, I just want to sum up a few things. Kelly is sharing with us amazing neuroscience facts. I hope, coaches, you're already seeing how some of this information is applicable to our clients. And I already see we have some great information, some questions in the chat box. For example, when is negative bias helpful for survival and when is it hindering? Right. So remember, whenever there is a status quo is interrupted in our lives, we have a negative bias. We're going to think of a limiting belief. So that's already enlightening for our clients to know that it's normal to actually think negatively. It's normal. Like whenever we get that unexpected email from our boss or on our phone, our boss is calling, most of the time we think something is wrong. And that's normal. So it's educating our clients that it's like, yeah, we do have a negative bias, but then it's like that picture said before, that negative bias is that amygdala, that small part of the lizard brain. It's our job as coaches to help our clients move from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, which is the human part of the brain, which is rational thinking, logical thinking, to be able to see a situation without the emotion, because that's when we can actually make more, effective decisions and actions. So I just wanted to put that out there that there's so much great information Dr. Kelly is sharing with us, like that the fact that the brain is endlessly plastic, that in itself is amazing news we can tell our clients, right? That whatever they're going through right now, if you see it as a skill set, the brain's capacity to grow in any skill set is infinite. Like that itself is mind-blowing, pun intended. So I think Kelly literally is so great at talking about neuroscience because she's a neuroscientist. But for us coaches, we need to kind of take a step back and kind of take it all in. It's like, imagine sharing with our clients, if they're having a hard time building their coaching practice, if they're having a hard time perfecting that powerful question. Those are skill sets that with intention and effort, they can get better at. The brain's capacity to get better at anything is infinite. So even already coaches, I want you to start imagining, what if you shared that with your clients and then ask them powerful questions about that? Hey, did you know that the brain is infinitely plastic and you can learn anything if you put effort into? So I think that's where I want us to be taking it all in, coaches, that this is directly applicable to our relationship with our clients. All right, so we're talking about resilience today, right? So resilience as a skill set, right? So the definition, we're simply saying resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, right? Bouncing back. So I'm gonna launch a poll right now and and just, don't overthink the poll, but pick these two questions. Which area could you use more resilience? With getting rejections in your business growth or recovering from a terrible coaching session? Right? So no need to overthink, but out of those two, which one do you think you could bounce back quicker from? Which one do you think sometimes you are too hard on yourself? Is it when you get rejected from a client, or is it when you have a horrible coaching session? So, I'll just give this poll a few more seconds. Just think which one, would you like to grow from? All right, I'm gonna end the poll and I'll share the results. So it looks like, yeah, most of us would love to bounce back quicker from getting rejected in our business growth. And then some of us, so 71%, and then 29% of us would like to get better at recovering from a terrible coaching session. All right, so I'll stop sharing that. And I think that's normal, right, to feel defeated when we get a rejection in our business growth. But what did Dr. Kelly tell us already? In order for learning to happen, it needs to be emotional and uncomfortable. It's like literally a prerequisite in the brain. If you don't feel emotion, or if there's no sense of emotional arousal, you're not learning anything. So that's another reframe for our clients. When they're feeling icky or uncomfortable or scared out of their comfort zone, we celebrate that. We celebrate that because it means their brain is about to learn, right? Remember those two cells, the left and the right? We cannot get to the right we cannot get to the cell on the right with more synapses in the brain if you do not go through discomfort, because learning only happens when there's emotional arousal and you feel something, right? If there's no, you don't feel anything, you don't learn anything. So that's super important to remind our clients, because, you know, I celebrate clients now when they feel discomfort and fear, because it means they're about to learn something, right? So and resilience is a skill set, and that's a huge takeaway I want us to have too, to remind our clients the ability to bounce back is a skill that you get better at the more you practice it, right? But it has to have intention and an effort. Meaning, like, well, if you have clients who want to get better, well, or some of us today, we want to get better at recovering from rejection from some of our business growth, right? Well, do you want to get better at it? Because if you do, you can. But if you don't have any desire to grow in that area, you know, then there's nothing anyone can really do until someone has an effort to intention to want to get better. So, all right, let's move on. So the next slide is how to coach around healthy emotional habits. So yeah, we're kind of launching into part 2, where I built this coaching framework called the straight A's of emotional regulation and personal growth. So we're going to go through these A's right now. So what does this mean, though? So the straight A's is a framework that it applies to really any coaching situation, and it applies to any transformation that we're going through. And today we're applying it to getting better at resilience and getting better at managing our emotions, right? So the 6 A's are acceptance, awareness, ask, action, accountability, and acknowledgement. So what does that mean? So first I want to go over acceptance and awareness. So in terms of neuroscience and in terms of building resilience, acceptance is the first A. As coaches, now that we're learning all these cool facts about neuroscience, there's things we must accept about the brain. Like, because we can't dispute the fact that the brain is endlessly plastic. We have to accept it. If you want to learn something, you have infinite capacity to do so if you choose to. We got to accept that. We got to accept that our brain has a negative bias, meaning whenever, you know, something happens unexpected, we tend to think negatively. And that's because, as Dr. Kelly explained, if our ancestors always thought that that was not a lion in the bushes about to eat them, they would get eaten by the lion in the bushes. So we still have that in us, that it's normal to feel negative. It's normal to, you know, feel fear or think of the worst case scenario. But that's that lizard brain, right? So we got to accept that, but we also can accept that as humans, we're the most evolved part of our brain is the prefrontal cortex. So when we're aware our lizard brain is being negative, we as humans do have the power to move it to the prefrontal cortex. We got to accept that. Accepting what else? Oh, learning is uncomfortable. We got to accept that. If you want to learn something new, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to feel emotions. So, and emotions are learning and are tied, as Dr. Kelly was saying. So those are all things we must accept about our brain. Sorry, we can't debate those. And awareness is then asking our clients to grow awareness with their relationship with those things, right? Asking, so what is your relationship with negativity? What is your relationship with understanding that your brain is infinitely plastic, right? And then we want our clients to become aware of, are you even consciously taking advantage of these wonderful parts of the brain, right? And then we're going to go over ask and action right now, because asking is like, let's say I'm aware I'm not very resilient, right? And let's say now I've accepted resilience as a skill set, just like riding a bike. If I want to get better at riding a bike, what do? I ride a bike. If I want to get better being resilient, what do? Practice being resilient. So then we ask ourselves, that's the third A, well, what is my relationship with resilience? What can I do about it? Do I want to get better at it? And what kind of actions can I take differently? And Dr. Kelly is going to share with us some brain-based actions we can take to get better at resilience. So I'll turn it back over to you, Kelly.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I want to talk a tiny little bit about some of our actions that we can take and how there are some evidence-based practices. And I'm going to show you another picture that you're going to be mad at me about. We're going to look at that scary spider just for a moment, and then I'm going to make it go away. So that scary spider, even in those of you who may not be acknowledging it right now, initiated a fight or flight response in your brain. And we know this from lots of studies, and there is some evidence that we have some genetic code that actually does initiate some very normal default fear for spiders that's evolutionarily ancient, okay? And so some of us are really aware of our fear of spiders and we totally despise them. We have a phobia maybe. And some of us may think, no big deal, you showed me a gross spider, I don't care. Or I think that spider is beautiful. But for most of us, there probably was a little bit of an arousal response or a stress response in the brain. And I'm sort of depicting that with these little cartoons here. They're little almonds, like the shape of the amygdala, and they are representing fight and flight, right? So they see that spider, they're having this fear response. But the reason I am walking us through this is because I noticed the number of participants before and after I showed the spider image, and it didn't change, okay? So you all didn't get up and get out. You all didn't log off the meeting out of that much fear, right? So I just want to alert you to the reality that we are already armed with and using the tools that allow us to employ our prefrontal cortex to be rational and to realize when threats are not actual threats that are going to prohibit us from functioning, okay? And so if you can imagine another little cartoon here where we've got our wise prefrontal cortex who is saying to our amygdala, it's two-dimensional. That was just Dr. Kelly being weird with her spider on the screen. It's not actually going to hurt you, and you don't have to go anywhere. Everything's going to be fine. So that process that I'm kind of belaboring is taking place in your brain right now. Okay, again, even for those of you who are not in touch with a particular fear of spiders, you are experiencing that your prefrontal cortex is keeping you in your seat and keeping you here because you want to ride this presentation out to its conclusion. Okay, so that means if you've already got this very wise prefrontal cortex that is doing work that you're not even aware of, then I want you to sit with that as the launch pad, because that means the potential is so profound. It's already doing a lot of work to help you bounce back from things that are not really a threat right now in this moment in 2020, right? We inherited this region that is responding to threats that are really much more real in our times of evolution when we were first evolving, right? Most of the time, we're not going to come across a lion that's an actual predator or some other version that's an actual predator that's actually going to take our life, right? But we are functioning with a flight or fight response system that was evolved for that purpose, okay? So we've already got the equipment to help us override that. And so now we ask, how do we do the work to practice and consciously and intentionally employ that part of the brain, okay? So one way is very, very simple, but very, very evidence-based. Okay, actually, I'm going to do this. So in the lab, this is another book that I will recommend. So Alan was asking, I think Alan was asking for some book recommendations before many of us were in the Zoom room. And one that I will recommend, I think is just called Social. And it's by Matthew Lieberman, who is a researcher here at UCLA. We're all in LA. And he does lots of research on how the brain is wired to be social, and it's very related to research he does on our emotional processing as well. And this is a study he did where he has people get into that fMRI. Again, they're doing a cognitive task, and he shows them an image of someone feeling emotional distress or some sort of range of emotions. Okay, so you see, for instance, the person in the fMRI would look at a picture of this young woman. She's feeling some kind of way, right? She's got something going on. We don't know exactly what, but what happens to the person in the fMRI is they feel emotion on behalf of her. We are very wired to be social, which is a whole other content area that we talk about in our Mastermind Institute course. But we are, empathetic creatures, which is wonderful about us. And so what we'll see is that we have an emotional response in our own brain in response to this young woman. Our amygdala will begin to fire, okay? And we'll feel some sort of distress. And then the researcher will ask the participant in the fMRI, I would like you to label her emotions. That's all. I just want you to label her emotions. So you can either say it to yourself in your own mind, or you can choose from one of these two options. Or sometimes people can write it down in some experimental circumstances, okay? But the point is to simply put a name to that emotion. And what happens in this fMRI is that we see two things occur. One, the prefrontal cortex becomes very active. It comes online, so to speak, and the amygdala becomes much more quiet. And so what is happening is we're turning on our wise prefrontal cortex area and turning down our evolutionarily more ancient amygdala fight or flight response emotional system, simply by labeling our emotions. And there are any number of ways that we can now begin to practice using that skill set as a tool for enhancing our own capacity for resilience. We could have a set of Post-its up on the wall with a variety of emotions, and we pull one off according to how we're feeling at any one time. Maybe we crumple it up and throw it in the trash. We could, simply take a moment to breathe and say how we're feeling to ourselves, to just get in the habit of naming our own emotions as a way to regulate them. This is an emotional regulation practice. And the idea is currently in this year, in this time, in this place, in this pandemic, in the, strife that we're all experiencing together, we need to build our skill sets for resilience. And so one of the things we recommend, just, along with any other number of possibilities, is how do you build the habit of naming your emotions and being in touch with them? Perhaps journaling. This is just one idea that we have of a variety of ways because sometimes people being in touch with their emotions can be a foreign idea. It can feel impossible. We do have some stigmas in our society about being in touch with our feelings. And so maybe we have to do the work to get past some of those barriers ourselves, and we can build in habits that are very accessible by just writing about our day. And over the course of that practice, getting in touch with our emotions can come out more naturally. So that's just one idea we have for how to build in the habits of naming it to tame it as an evidence-based practice to build up our capacity for resilience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing some of those actions. And the last A's in the straight A's of emotional regulation is accountability and acknowledgement. So like I said, this name it to tame it, finding ways to express your emotion, or that in itself already helps us move from our lizard brain to our prefrontal cortex, right? And then that's when our clients are much more effective and productive in the prefrontal cortex. So when we and our clients are able to try these different actions, the accountability piece is, how can we hold ourselves accountable that we're working on improving our lizard brain or managing our lizard brain? How can others hold me accountable? And then acknowledgement is, how can you find ways to acknowledge yourself when you notice that you're actually getting better at regulating your lizard brain and getting more resilient? And then how can you acknowledge others who've helped you along the way? Like several of us had said, we want to get more resilient at managing rejections when we're building our business. So how can you maybe create the system to manage your emotions better? How can you hold yourself accountable? And how can you acknowledge yourself when you do that? Yeah. So the next slide. So this is the bottom line, is we've been really saying the process of strengthening the prefrontal cortex, it helps us move from default emotions and actions to more productive emotions and actions. And that's what we really want, is resilience is that ability to recognize when your amygdala is going crazy, I'm feeling bad, fear, all these crazy negative limiting beliefs, and slowing down to recognize that and consciously move to the prefrontal cortex by naming that emotion. I think Agnar is saying, even, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Oops, did I oh, there I is. Even as Agnar was saying in the chat, recognizing, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? That is a name it to tame it. That in itself will decrease the amygdala activity and help us move to the prefrontal cortex. And that's how you build resilience, right? You build resilience by knowing when your amygdala is acting up and actively going to the prefrontal cortex. So next slide. So this is where, for coaches, it gets really exciting, is how do we actually introduce this into coaching? So I came up with something called the 4 C's. So the 4 C's listed here is coaching application, content, context, and client's understanding. What does this mean? So let's say, I'm going to be doing a demo in a second, and we're going to be practicing with a partner in a few minutes as well. But what does this mean? So let's say I'm in a coaching session and someone is sharing a challenge with me. So everyone, I want you already to thinking right now, what is a challenge you currently have where you would like to build a little bit more resilience? You want a little bit more, capability to bounce back quicker. So let's have a client sharing with me, could be business. They're just really stressed and they're not getting any clients. So that's the coaching application. I'm thinking about, what neuroscience information can I apply here? Then content is the what. That's actually directly sharing with our client a neuroscience fact about the brain. So for example, if I know my client is practicing the skill set of closing a client, let's say, that's a skill set. And what did we learn about skill sets? The brain is infinitely plastic on any skill set. So I remind them, well, and we learned that in order for learning to take place, we have to have emotional arousal. So I could share with my client, hey, well, did you know that you need to feel emotion in order to learn something. And also, any skill set is, our brain is infinitely plastic. Meaning, if you choose to get better at that skill set, the more you do it, you will get better at it. The brain's capacity to get better at a skill set is infinite. So that's the content, is directly stating a neuroscience fact. Context, why am I sharing this information? So then I simply say, I'm sharing this information with you because if you see this skill set of closing clients as infinite, that you will get better at it, I think it will help you have a different perspective. And then client's understanding is ask powerful questions about what you just said, about the brain science you just shared, which is, what are your thoughts on that? How does neuroplasticity, which I just shared, apply to your situation about closing clients? And then you can coach around that. So those are the 4 C's. It's really fun, and it's really fun because you're able to take this cool neuroscience and then apply it into coaching. So let me actually try to do a quick demo on one of you. So so while I do this demo, we're going to do it before we do our breakout rooms. So I want to try to be able to, do a quick demo of the 4 C's. So who would like to be brave enough to, be in the coaching hot seat? Who has a challenge they're having, or who has something that they'd like to be more resilient about? Anyone? I see a lot of people have their cameras off. If if you'd like to turn your camera on, we could participate. So anyone would like to volunteer? Well, I will call on someone if there's no volunteers. So, and if you're feeling a little bit nervous, that means you're about to learn something. So that's a good thing. So, what about Agnar? Did you have a situation where maybe you would like to feel more courageous or more resilient?
I was just actually thinking of really bouncing back into normal life after all this lockdown. I think I'm finding that a little bit challenging at the moment. So I don't know if it's just the fears of everything, or trying to keep myself safe because I want to travel and see my daughter, or, there are so many aspects that go into that, and it's affecting my health as a matter of fact. So, maybe we can work on that if that's fine.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for being brave enough to, you didn't really volunteer. I kind of, but thank you for being brave enough to be the practice client. And what I'm hearing from you, Agnar, is that, we're all of us in the world right now are going through this massive period of adjustment and uncertainty. So what I'm hearing from you right now is right now you're feeling a little bit of fear and stress about readjusting to the world. When can you see your daughter again? When are things going to be back to normal? So is that what I'm hearing from you? Is that we're currently feeling that?
Yes, actually, I was feeling that a lot more until I took my first trip, and I actually went to Dubai to see my daughter after the lockdown for 9 months. And I realized the fear that we were living in, and the liberation that happened for me that instant when I actually took my first step and went to the airport. And it was a feeling, it's a bizarre feeling, like, oh my God, where are we? We're starting from step one after all this, this openness and everything. But now I'm traveling again to see her, and I'm just going into that fear of, I don't want to live life again normally. Although I had pledged to myself that I am going to stop being afraid of COVID, and I'm just going to go in the world and just, be safe and just practice whatever we need to practice and, take it from there. But then when there is something that is, I have a trip planned, I become all very nervous, and I don't want to go out again, and I want to just stay locked in, and I would just want to preserve all this time in order to just do that thing. And it's not something I've ever done in my life. I'm always on a plane. I'm always doing everything. It's just very limiting and very upsetting for me.
Yeah. No, I feel you. And thank you for being vulnerable and honest. I definitely feel that, that stress. So let me ask you, Agnar, in our short time together today, how would you like to feel by the end of our short session today?
I would like to feel relaxed about just practicing life before traveling and just being okay with it. And I would be fine. I won't catch anything, and I will actually go on my trip. I just want to feel that relaxed feeling that, now when I'm thinking about it, I just don't want to go out because I just want to be okay till the Saturday that not the Saturday, the one after, and that's a long time, and I can't stop life, from happening.
Yeah.
So I would like to feel more relaxed, and have more faith.
Well, what's interesting, Agnar, that even as you're talking about how you want to feel more relaxed, and I saw you take that deep breath, you actually appear more relaxed in this moment than you did 3 minutes ago.
Maybe because I'm talking about it. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, exactly that. I learned some cool neuroscience facts, Agnar. A couple of things. It's that our brains have a negative bias, meaning like when the world gets turned upside down, it's actually normal for us to feel negative and stress and think of the worst case, because if we didn't think of the worst case, our evolutionary speaking, we wouldn't have survived as a species, right? So I want to let you know you're normal, and it's normal to feel stressed and scared because the world has definitely been disrupted. But so that's the first thing I want to share with you. The second thing, though, I want to share with you is that when you talk about your emotions and talk about how you feel and talk about how you want to feel, that helps us move from that emotional part of our brain to the more human part of the brain. So the emotional part is called the amygdala, and the human part of our brain is called the prefrontal cortex. And that's the human part of our brain where we get to decide how I want to feel and how I want things to go. And simply talking about it actually helps you relax that, emotion part of the brain, and it helps you feel more empowered about the human part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I believe that if you talk more about how you want to feel and imagine how you want to feel, you'll actually be able to feel that way quicker. You'll be able to bounce back quicker and feel that way. So what are your thoughts about what I just shared with you?
That's absolutely correct, because the minute I was talking about it, I could just see it, and I could imagine it. And the funny thing, I do that with my clients. And then when it comes to me, I'm just sitting there and say, okay, but I just did this morning, I just did it this morning with a client, and I say, oh, okay, but it's very hard to apply it to yourself. And it's definitely true. The minute you talk about it, you can just see it.
Yeah. I love that. And you're absolutely right. I think oftentimes what we do for our clients, we really need to be doing for ourselves. I think we're all guilty of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I
I
love
already feel better.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I love seeing the change within you now. You're smiling, you feel more light.
Yes.
So even within our short time together, Agnar, what would you say is your biggest kind of takeaway from learning a little bit of brain science and learning about what's happening in your body and your brain?
I think just talking about it, definitely being able to visualize it or feel it, or force yourself to feel what you want to feel, I think just takes you really a long way to where you want to go. Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, thank you for showing that. You literally showed us how when you tame your emotional brain, the lizard brain, and you move to the human part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, it makes a huge difference. And we visually see it in you, your body language,
Definitely.
your energy.
I'm all ready for next week, so I'm good. I'm good now.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for volunteering. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Agnar.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cool. Well, as you could see, folks, like that's kind of a cool casual way to work in some of that neuroscience, right? You know, the 4 C's, coaching application. You know, what can I share with her? Content. Here's a neuroscience fact I want to share. Context. Here's why I'm telling you this. And client's understanding. Ask a few questions, you know, like I asked Agnar, well, what are your thoughts about what I just shared? How does this apply to your situation? So let's Farah, if you could help me with breakout rooms, if we could do, you know, groups of 2, and you don't have to put me, Kelly, and Anne-Marie in one, and we're gonna maybe about 18 minutes total. So 18 minutes total. So let's try to do 9 minutes each. I know it's very fast, folks, but what we want to do is practice being the coach and the client, right? And when the client, just share like Agnar did, something that's kind of stressful in your mind that you want to build some resilience, you know, just share a couple sentences. And when you're being the coach, just kind of think about what I just did. What neuroscience did I learn today that I could apply here? And then share the fact. You know, and then Anne-Marie, can you put the 4 C's in the chat, please? I think someone's asking. So I think if we could simply see what the client is sharing with you, and then think about, how does neuroscience apply here? And then, you know, content, why am I sharing, or what do I want to share? Context, why am I sharing it? And then client's understanding is ask questions about it. So. And don't stress about it, right? If you're feeling a little bit nervous, that's a good thing. It means you're about to learn something new. So don't stress out, trust yourself. So let's do 18 minutes total, 9 minutes each, then switch, and then we'll come back and do a quick debrief and wrap up. So how does that sound? So we'll see you in 18 minutes. If we could open up those breakout rooms, that would be awesome.
Sure. I will be in few moments. Everybody will be moved.
Yes. Yeah, I'm excited to see you all be able to practice this.
It was something new for me. I've never experienced it before, so it was very interesting, very new for me. I enjoyed it very much.
Nice.
Thanks to Alan.
Yes, cool. Well, thank you for coming back, and so I would love to hear from one of you. How was it? I mean, what was that like, kind of practicing, trying to incorporate neuroscience into a coaching session? I'll ask Roshmi, how was it?
Hi, Hayden. Thanks for picking on me. Actually,
Yes.
I did want to share that. It was actually really good. You know, it reminded me of like process coaching, you know, in the coactive model. And just, of course, we didn't get into it at that level, but you know, just mine was with Nada, and just, you know, getting her to name her emotion, and then you know, giving my new little facts now that I've learned with neuroscience, and you know, giving her a context as to, you know, how this helps or why this helps, and then, you know, kind of getting her reflection on it. I think was really useful. Yeah, so I really enjoyed the experience.
Yes, no, thank you so much. Of course, with these things, we wish we had more time, right? Yeah, because there's so much great content. But we wanted to wrap up here, you know, with a few key points and takeaways. Kelly, you want to go over the first couple?
Yes, absolutely. Just to be sure we're leaving with our big take-home messages, which is that our brain is incredibly plastic and has infinite potential to change. There's no exception. And I didn't hammer it home in the beginning, but it also is true all the way into old age. Okay, so this is true. We can teach old dogs new tricks. Applied effort and practice accelerates that change. And our lizard brain does have a negative bias when our status quo is disrupted, and we need to know that. But that intentionally regulating our emotions strengthens our prefrontal cortex. It builds the skill sets of emotional regulation and resilience.
Nice. And Dr. Kelly told us some great brain-based strategies to help us build resilience, including journaling, talking about your emotions with a trusted friend or professional like your coach, you know, and even practicing asking yourself, how am I feeling? How do I want to feel? And what action can I take to feel that way? That is all prefrontal cortex work. And these, which the strategies strengthen our PFC, which then helps us move from the default emotions and actions of our lizard brain, to more productive actions and emotions of our prefrontal cortex. So if you want to hang out with me, Kelly, and Anne-Marie more, we are excited. All of our information or material today was from our online course, Information for Transformation, the Neuroscience of Coaching. It is an ICF accredited course. It's a video course. So you get 12 CCEUs for completing that course. And we have live Q&As every 2 weeks where you can practice with a partner just like we did today. And we have a lot longer time to practice. And because ICF Saudi Arabia is awesome, we do want to offer you this 30% coupon code. So if you go to the website is mastermindinstitute.com. It's also in the chat. If you go to mastermindinstitute.com and you want to take our course, you could enter the promo code ICF Saudi Arabia 30 to save 30%. And that is that, Emery, it says till Sunday. Is that till Friday or just Sunday?
Oh, sorry. That's my fault. Sorry.
Okay. Well, we have this 30% off for you. Well, should we say till Sunday then, I guess? Since that's what it says.
Sure. I can change it till Sunday. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So between now and Sunday, we can save 30%. And then after Sunday, you could use the promo code ICF Saudi Arabia 15 to save 15% indefinitely. But if you want to get in that 30% between now and Sunday, please check us out. And last slide is, this was so awesome, ICF Saudi Arabia. Please visit us at mastermindinstitute.com. You could check us out on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please email us at hello@mastermindinstitute.com. And once again, thank you so much for staying up until 10 in the evening. I hope all of you got some great learning. And thank you so much, Kelly. Did you want to say a final word?
Yes, it was great to be with you all. Thank you so much. It was really fun today.
Can I have one question?
Yes.
I'm from Jordan. Does this apply to the Jordan as well, or only to Saudi Arabia?
Oh yes, of course. Yes, you can use the promo code anywhere in the world. And
okay, cool. Thank you.
No, thank you, Agnar. So I'll turn it back over to Islam.
At the registration.
Yes, Thank you
so much for being here. We learned so much. I know I did, that's for sure. And I can't wait to start applying these concepts with my clients and with myself, actually. I hope you guys will visit us again in 2021. And I hope that it'll be an even, I hope it'll be a more abundant year. And I use the word abundant, and I'm intentionally using that word abundant. You see, I'm being intentional. Okay, I'm naming it. So thank you so much. This was, exactly. I agree with Maha. This was a beautiful session. I really enjoyed it. And thank you to all of you for coming. All the best to our members. And for those of you who would like to be members, please do contact, we'll type in the information for you in the chat on how to become a member of our chapter. Do reach out to Hayden and Kelly and Anne-Marie, of course, if you're interested. And we look forward to welcoming you again and again and again. Okay.
Oh, and actually, Anne-Marie will email you the slides that have the coaching parts of it. So you can email that out to people who registered. Yeah.
Please, that would be amazing. I would love, I'm just going to ask you that in the chat. So,
yes. So we got you covered. Cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Sleep well and happy holidays. And we will hope to see you in 2021. Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Islam. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, ICF Saudi Arabia.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.